Henry Lewis's career took off pretty much at the same time as yours.
Right. He had gone into the Los Angeles Philharmonic as a player when he was only 16, and that was already a tremendously big deal. He was like what we would say the Jackie Robinson of classical music, because there wasn't another black player in a major symphony in the United States at that time.
Wow. That's the sort of thing that we forget. He was the first black player in any American symphony orchestra.
That's right.
And then Zubin Mehta made him assistant conductor.
Yeah, that's right. Zubin was made the music director after there was a debacle with George Schulte.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember that? Did you ever hear about
Yep.
it? Yeah, and
heard it from Schulte. He turned up. He'd found they'd made another appointment without consulting him, and he got on the first flight home.
Right. I'll never forget one night. Several years later, many years later, actually, I had just done a concert with Zubin with the Philharmonic. By the way, Zubin is somebody I totally adore and have for 50 years. And afterwards, there was a party, a small dinner party, and we were sitting around this table, and the woman who did all the hiring and firing there in those days was a lady named Dorothy Chandler, whose husband owned the Los Angeles Times. And she's the one who hired Zubin as George's associate conductor. And we were speaking about the fact that she very much liked astrology, and she followed Carroll Reiter, that was his name. And she said, that's where I saw that I should hire Zubin as Schulte's assistant. And I said, my mouth sometimes gets the better of me, and I said, better you should have consulted Schulte.
And then he went on to turn the New Jersey Symphony into a top-flight orchestra.
Yeah.
When he was music director in New Jersey, it can't have been easy for you, being a conductor's wife as well as a famous singer, having to do the chores of greeting the patrons, attending the premieres.
Well, I did the best I could. I probably didn't do as well as I could, because most of my observances have shown me over my long life now is that conductors really need their wives to be sort of secretary and nurse and dresser and assistant and all kinds of things like that. So I was not able to fill those roles very well. I was dealing with my own career, and as you can imagine, you have to put an awful lot of time and preparation in when you reach a certain level.
Was that one of the problems that contributed to the ending of the marriage, that you were going in those different directions?
It could have been a bit of it. One thing I can tell you, it never had to do with race, that's for sure. Mm-hmm. But, we just grew apart like a lot of marriages do. But we remained very, very good friends. And we had a daughter, and you have to do that when you have a child. Not everybody does, I do know that, but we were able to, and we used to joke that we had a failed divorce.
After you had your daughter, was it then that the voice dropped from high Marie to middle range Rossini?
Not really. It's just that it seemed like I was getting into a repertory that nobody else could sing, enjoying it very, very much. And I think that, again, this fate, or, destino, whatever you want to call it, stepped in because I was asked to audition to sing with Joan.
Joan Sutherland.
Right, of course. And it became obvious that there was a lot of repertory that she was performing that I could probably do the other part. And we just sort of calculated in a way that maybe this is where I belong. Maybe this is what I was meant to do. I do think that my voice was settling a little bit, but this was also nothing new. Since the time I was about 15 or 16, people would hear my voice and they'd say, "Are you sure you're not a mezzo?" And I'd say, "Oh, no, I'm a soprano." Because I had an easy top and I had it, since I was a child, and I didn't think twice about it. But I was involved in singing a lot of mezzo music, but it just was crazy time, It was just me sort of singing everything. I had some kind of smarts with knowing what I should not sing, but singing lower music was not one of them. But remember, I was not singing Azucena, and I was not singing Amneris. I wasn't singing things like that. Mm-hmm. I was singing Nigra Sum in the Monteverdi Vespers.
In years to come, quizmasters will ask which American mezzo-soprano sang with Judy Garland but never with Maria Callas. There's only going to be one answer, isn't there?
Well, we were at a party one night and ended up in a room that was all red, ceiling, carpet, bedspreads, everything, sitting in the middle of the floor singing together. You know, it was fun. I was a little tipsy. I don't think she was, but I was. And so I was able to just sit there and enjoy it all.
And what were you singing?
She was making up a song. She was singing Louis B, Louis C, Louis D, Louis E, Louis F, Louis G. I think she meant Louis B. Mayer, but and then we went on to singing other pop songs together.
You were a huge admirer of Callas, but you never sang with her.
No, I never did. I really missed my opportunity. I listened to an agent that I had at the time who I had a lot of recitals booked in not very important places, but places in the United States. And I was asked if I would come and sing Adalgisa with her in Paris, her last Norma's. My agent said, "Oh, you can't do that. You're booked." I was very stupid. I should have swum the Atlantic to do that. But I listened to my agent and fulfilled my engagements.
How different was she, do you think, from Joan Sutherland? You knew how easily you could work with Joan.
I'm going to throw that back at you.
Go on.
How different do you think they were, Norman?
Oh, chalk and cheese, obviously. Obviously. But, I mean, you'd settled into that pattern of working with a fellow Anglophone who was Joan Sutherland, who was of even temperament, whereas with Callas it would have been much more exciting.
Well, I think I was definitely drawn to that aspect of Callas for sure, to really get into the words, and especially in the recitatives are so terribly important for me, and they were, I think, for Callas too. Maybe a little less for Joan. I wouldn't like to say that, but it's possible. And I liked very much her temperament, and we know she had her vocal flaws, but she was. What do I have to? Come on, the world knows who Callas was.
Which of the men did you enjoy working with?
Come on, I loved singing with Luciano.
Sure.
What's not to love, right?
I was just going to say, I just saw on YouTube a clip of you singing Verdi Requiem in Milano with Abbado. Must have been about 1970, and Luciano, very young.
Right.
Is sitting behind you and looking up at you in frank amazement.
Really?
Absolutely wonderful, yeah.
I must watch that. Well, Luciano, that was something else. I don't have to talk about him either. Everybody knows what it was. But I have to say, for my own self, I get a catch in my throat when I hear his voice on the radio or on discs or YouTube. The sound of that voice, it makes me very sad still. And to think that we shared the same disease, that also, at the end of his life, we were not only sharing music, but we were sharing pancreatic cancer.
Yeah. Just coming back to La Scala, you had a celebrated moment there with Beverly Sills when there were two Americans who were going on stage, and as far as you saw it, there was only going to be one.
Well, it was just a question of the machinations that were taking place with her press team, and the people at La Scala were very kind and nice to me, and I'd already been there because I made my actual debut in Oedipus Rex, which I thought was kind of fun to make my debut there in one of the great works of Stravinsky, and then went on to sing The Siege of Corinth of Rossini, and Beverly was part of the cast. But the Scala people said her press agent is coming up to the press room where all the pictures and things are, and choosing everything that's going to the periodicals like New York Times and Time Magazine, etc., etc., and he's leaving you out. And I couldn't take that.
So what did you do?
Just went into her dressing room very shortly before the curtain opened and told him that if my picture did not appear in the New York Times, I would come to his office and smash him in the face. That was the opening. But it had to do with machinations, as I said, which were going on behind the scenes, that's all. But, Beverly was seizing her moment to become a super-duper pooper star, and that's the way it goes in this profession. But I did not want to be pushed against the wall.
I think you said at the time a singer has to look after herself.
I think that's pretty much it, and it still holds.
Did conductors give you much trouble?
Occasionally, oh yes, especially with the Rossini. The Rossini was very difficult because the conductors did not want to, at that time, allow any kind of ornaments and embellishments to the music, which of course with Richard Bonynge and with Henry and myself and Joan, we'd all done a lot of research on this, and we knew that the performance practices in the days of Rossini was quite different. That the reason why those cavatinas and cavalettas were written twice was the second time you better come around and show off what you can do. And so I had a lot of trouble with this. It seemed to always,
Anyone in particular?
Well, even down to Abbado, whom I absolutely adored, and we'd sung quite a bit together, and I had problems with the conductor at the Met. His name is Gabor Utwish. He was hired to do the new production of Italiana there, and I started to rehearse, and he was fairly insulting, and I just said, what? I don't think we're going to be able to do this together. And I just closed my book and said goodbye. I walked out, which, having had this happen already several times, I was prepared with a contract that said the version, that's how we put it, the version will be in agreement with Miss Horne. And at that time we had, for a very short time, Raphael Kubelik was our general music director, and he was the one that chose Maestro Utwish to conduct the opera. And it came down to reading the contract, basically. And I'll never forget when he came in opening night to me and said, well, you see, everything works out. Everything's going to be peace and love and light and all of that. I said, yeah, but it would not have been without that contract. Okay. And, you get a little jaded about things like that, but you are prepared. So I'm switching.
So you walked out and you walked back in and you said you do it my way.
I don't think I used those words, but I was certainly adamant that I did it my way or the highway. And then I'll fast forward to La Scala when I went to sing it there. They already had a very successful production there with Berganza in the role of Isabella in Italiana. And because Claudio and I shared the same management, he didn't feel comfortable with putting that clause in the contract for La Scala. And I said, oh, God, here we go again. But I let it go because I had sung with Abbado Oedipus Rex and done concerts with him and things like Mahler and evenings with other music. But I went to first of all, I took great pains to copy all of my embellishments and send them to him so that he would know exactly what he was dealing with. Well, we sat in a rehearsal and everybody else was present, and I knew that the eyes were on me. The American singer, it always was that way when you were very much the foreigner in those days. And, oh, well, here were the comments. No, I don't like that. No, you shouldn't do that. And I just stopped. I said, you know what, Claudio? I do think that you and I should be alone first before we rehearse the rest of the opera. Again, he didn't want to do it, and I said, I sent you all of my ornaments and embellishments, and he just started striking them out, and I said, you know what, I don't want to do it if I can't do it in a way that I've really worked it out and think is correct. So I went again to a hotel room and said, I'm out of here on the first plane tomorrow morning. And the flowers started to arrive from the Sovrintendente and from various other people, and Claudio said okay. And we had wonderful performances. Of course, the great thing was the reviews that came out that said, up to now we've had Mozart, now we have Rossini.
How did you get on with Leonard Bernstein?
Very well, very well. There's a certain thing about coming from the same land and understanding sort of deep down what it's all about to be an American in this case. And I think that we shared too. But Lenny always used to say to me, and I take this as a great, great compliment, that Lenny said, you do things musically before I tell you to do them. I think of it and you've already done it, that kind of thing. And he had such great ability to teach also and to instruct, and you couldn't have a meal with Lenny without learning something. That was a wonderful, great collaboration.
The foundation that you've set up has presented more than 100 new singers and reached 50,000 children across the United States. What are you aiming for? What's the goal?
Well, the first aim was for me when I decided to set up the foundation. I was facing my 60th birthday, and I said, I think it's time for me to start giving back big time because I've had such a wonderful life in music. I decided that the place that I saw where it was needed was recitals because they were becoming fewer and far between in the United States.
So you're trying to fix a broken infrastructure?
Yeah, I was trying very, very hard. What I succeeded in doing, I think, was creating a foundation that got a very fine reputation for doing really, really good, solid work and becoming quite well known throughout the country for people who loved recitals, wanted to sing recitals, and I created a real interest for lots of young singers. I do know that they wanted very much to be a part of it. But what has happened is we are now being absorbed into Carnegie Hall and will no longer be the Marilyn Horne Foundation. We will be the Marilyn Horne Legacy at Carnegie Hall, and we are going to be a part of their Weil Institute, which is for children's concerts, local recitals. We didn't just perform for children. That was a part of the outreach. We were there really performing for the public, and we had these residencies in various cities throughout the country. We were the only foundation that was dedicated only to singing.
Is it harder for young singers, young American singers today, than it was when you were growing up in the Great Depression?
I think it's more difficult in many, many ways because of certain other requirements. And now we are dealing with HD, and that is making an enormous change in opera. Look, I happen to think that television ruined our lives, basically. And now we have the internet. It's just like a monster there in front of us. And YouTube, and people have so much...
So how does opera and singing survive in this environment?
I don't know. To tell you the truth, I'm really... The way it's going to survive is that there will always be voices coming along who want to sing it. That's for sure. And I hear them all the time. I'm constantly hearing auditions, especially for my school in Santa Barbara. We listened live to 573 singers this year to take 23 places. So I hear the voices coming all the time. But the question is how they're going to be used. I don't have to go into, you write about this all the time anyway, the kinds of productions that they're being asked to perform in and the kinds of physical attributes that are now becoming quite necessary because HD has really come on so strong. And I have many friends who live in different cities that love it. They wouldn't miss one of those broadcasts.
All they want to see is opera on television, but not in the opera house anymore because they can't see it live enough.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, I happen to go to the Met a lot, first of all, because I live in New York, but I also live a block from where the Met is, so I go there and hear lots of things. And I must say, a lot of the things that are very successful on HD are not so successful in the live performances. They're very different. A lot of people you can't hear very well. And that's the thing that's disturbing me the most.
And I've seen directors who watched their first night performances from the television truck outside rather than from the house.
Absolutely, no question about it.
How do you tell singers to contend with this? They can't have a Marilyn Horne clause in their contract anymore. How do they resist these onslaughts on their integrity?
Well, I tell you, they'll have to do what I did before I could get a clause, right? You have to figure out how you can survive in the situation. Maybe they have to do some dumb things on stage, but they'll have to do it until they get some modicum of control. Well, I can't do that, or I don't want to do that, or I won't do that. Not everybody gets the control. We know that too. But I have to still, in my position as a teacher and as certainly a promoter and helper of young singers, I have to still teach them in the way that I was brought up, to get their voices having a wonderful technique that will sail out in the hall, whatever size it is. I have to still teach that. I can't teach while you're going to be on a microphone. I have to go for the straight old singing principles. You can call it bel canto if you want to, how the 19th century singers were trained. I do have to go for that.
You've had a real struggle with pancreatic cancer.
I did.
And you faced it as you faced everything openly with great transparency. And
I was
great
very
resilience.
lucky that guardian angel was around again. I just really have done great. It's been 4.5 years since I was diagnosed, and I just knock on wood every day, but I'm still here.
Marilyn Horne, thank you very much.
Norman, great to talk to you. Thanks so much for having me.